My name is Carmen Rodríguez, I am 50 years old, and I'm from Seville, Spain. What I'm about to tell you happened 3 years ago, but it feels like yesterday. I can still feel every detail of that moment that completely changed the way I see life, death, and everything that exists between these two mysteries. It was an ordinary Tuesday in October. The sky was clear, with that deep blue typical of Andalusian autumn. I worked as a literature teacher at a secondary school and was heading home after a particularly exhausting day. I remember thinking about the dinner I would prepare for my family. My husband Javier and our 2 children, Miguel, 16, and Sofia, 13, was driving along Avenida de la Palmera when I felt a sudden, intense pain in my chest. It was as if someone had placed a giant vice around my heart and was squeezing with all their strength. My left arm began to tingle and the pain radiated to my jaw. Even without medical training, I knew immediately what was happening: a heart attack. I managed to pull the car over to the shoulder, but barely had time to turn off the engine. The pain was unbearable, far beyond anything I had ever experienced, including the births of my children. I tried to grab my cell phone to call emergency services, but my hands no longer obeyed my brain's commands. I felt a cold sweat taking over my entire body and my vision began to darken at the edges, as if someone were slowly closing a black curtain around me. Remember thinking, it can't be now. I still have so much to do. My children still need me. The fear was overwhelming in those first seconds. Fear of dying, fear of leaving my family, fear of the unknown. But then, something extraordinary began to happen. The pain disappeared. It simply vanished, as if someone had flipped a switch. The relief was so immense it almost made me cry, if I could still cry. And then I noticed something strange. I was looking down at the interior of my car. I could see my own body slumped over the steering wheel, head fallen to the side, eyes half closed. It was me, without a doubt, but at the same time it was no longer me. I was above, floating near the car's ceiling, observing that scene with surreal detachment. I didn't feel panic at this sight. In fact, I felt a deep calm, almost supernatural. It was as if I had just woken up from a heavy sleep and was finally truly awake for the first time in my life. My consciousness was clearer, more alert, more alive than it had ever been when inhabiting that body that now lay inert in the driver's seat. Could see everything with impossible clarity. Every detail of the car's interior, the crumbs on the center console, a small scratch on the dashboard I had never noticed, the reflection of sunlight on the rearview mirror. But it wasn't just vision. It was as if I could perceive everything in a completely new way, a way that didn't depend on physical eyes. It was a 360-degree perception, complete, without blind spots. Then I heard sirens in the distance. Someone must have seen my strangely parked car and called for help. I saw an ambulance approach and stop behind my vehicle. 2 paramedics rushed out, and one of them broke my car window to unlock the door. I watched as they checked my pulse, placed an oxygen mask on my face, and began CPR. One of them shouted, "No pulse. Prepare defibrillator." I could hear everything with perfect clarity, every word, every sound, even the unspoken thoughts of concern that seemed to emanate from them like invisible waves. It was fascinating and peaceful at the same time. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. There was a growing sense of peace and well-being that I had never experienced before. It was then that I noticed a change. The scene around me began to seem less important, less real somehow. My attention was drawn upward, or perhaps it wasn't exactly upward in normal spatial terms, it was more a direction that doesn't exist in the physical world. I began to move away, to rise, leaving my body and the paramedics' commotion behind. And then I saw the light. I've heard so many people describe this, always thought it was a metaphor or a hallucination caused by lack of oxygen to the brain. But it was nothing like that. It was real, more real than anything I knew in the material world. It wasn't just light in the sense of photons and electromagnetic waves. It was living light, conscious, filled with unconditional love and total acceptance. The light wasn't at a specific point. It was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I began to move toward it, or it came to me, I can't say which. As I got closer, I felt waves of pure love enveloping me. There is no word in Spanish, Portuguese, or any other human language that can adequately describe that love. It was absolute, without judgment, without conditions, without end all the worries I carried about my appearance, my work, whether I was a good enough mother, whether I had made the right choices in life, all of that simply dissolved. None of it mattered. I was completely accepted, completely loved, exactly as I was. It was the most liberating experience of my existence. Within that light, or perhaps as part of it, I felt the presence of other beings. I didn't see them with defined forms, but I knew they were there. One presence in particular stood out. I felt it was my grandmother, Maria, who had passed away when I was only 12. I didn't see her with eyes, but I recognized her essence, her unique energy, as clearly as I would recognize her face in a photograph. Without words, without sounds, we communicated. It was a direct transfer of thoughts and emotions, purer and clearer than any conversation I had ever had. She transmitted love and tranquility to me, assured me that everything was fine, that I was safe. I also felt the presence of my grandfather, of an uncle who had died young, of other ancestors I never knew in life but somehow recognized. Then something incredible happened. I began to relive my life, but not in a linear way. They were fragments, moments, scenes that jumped from one time to another without chronological order. I saw my first communion, the day I met Javier at university, the birth of my children, a silly argument with my sister years ago, a time I comforted a student who was being bullied, another time I was impatient with my mother. But it wasn't just a passive review. I experienced each moment from a completely new perspective. Not just what I felt, but what other people felt. When I saw the moment I comforted that student, I felt his gratitude and relief, how much my words had meant to him, how that simple gesture had changed something fundamental in his heart. When I saw the argument with my sister, I felt the pain my harsh words caused her, the sense of rejection she experienced. It was humbling and liberating at the same time. I clearly saw the moments when I acted with love and kindness, and the moments when I was selfish or cruel, even if unintentionally. But there was no external judgment, no condemning voice. The only judgment came from myself, from the clear recognition of the impact I had on others' lives. Understood something profound in that moment, that we are all connected in ways we don't perceive in everyday life. Every action, every word, every thought creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine. A casual kindness can change someone's day, who in turn treats another person better, and so on. The same goes for cruelty. Also saw moments from my childhood that I had completely forgotten. I remembered sitting on my grandmother Maria's lap while she told me stories, the smell of her lavender perfume, the feeling of absolute security. I saw my father teaching me to ride a bike, his infinite patience while I fell repeatedly. I saw my mother waking up at dawn to care for me when I was sick, the love in her tired eyes. Realized how many acts of love I had received throughout my life, small and large, that I had taken for granted or simply forgotten. Life was so precious, every moment a gift, and I had spent so much time worrying about trivialities that I missed many opportunities to simply be present and grateful. Then I received knowledge, not in words but in direct understanding. I understood that death was not the end, just a transition, like taking off old clothes. I understood that we are much more than our physical bodies, that consciousness continues, that love is the only real and eternal thing. I understood that each soul chooses its experiences in earthly life to learn and grow, that there are no true accidents or coincidences, for the interconnection of everything, how every atom in the universe is connected to all others, how the separation we experience in physical life is an illusion, useful for learning but fundamentally false. I saw that we are all part of a greater consciousness, individual sparks of an infinite divine flame. It was overwhelming and perfectly natural at the same time. It was as if I had always known these things on some deep level, and was just remembering what had always been true. The amnesia of physical incarnation was being temporarily suspended, and I could see clearly once again. Don't know how long I spent in that state. Time had no meaning in the way we know it. It could have been seconds or eternities. But then I felt a change. A choice being presented to me, not in words but in direct knowledge. I could continue, go deeper into that light, into that love, and not return to the physical body. Or I could go back. I thought of Javier, of Miguel, of Sofia. I saw the impact my death would have on them. I saw Miguel struggling with anger and confusion in adolescence without his mother to guide him. I saw Sofia, so young, carrying a deep wound of abandonment for the rest of her life. I saw Javier, my love, lost and lonely. I saw the years we still had ahead, the moments we hadn't yet lived, children's graduations, future weddings, grandchildren yet to be born. Also understood that my work on earth wasn't complete. There were things I came to do, experiences I still needed to live, lessons I still had to learn and teach. I wasn't told specifically what these things were that would destroy the purpose of learning through experience. But I felt a clear sense of incompleteness. The decision wasn't easy. That peace, that love, that feeling of being home, it was so tempting to stay. There was no pain, no fear, no struggle. But there was love there too, in the physical world. Love for my children, for my husband, for my family. And that love pulled me back. The moment I made the decision to return, everything changed instantly. It was like being sucked through a tunnel at impossible speed. The light began to recede, or I moved away from it. In an instant, I was back inside my body. The pain returned with full force, like a train hitting me. My chest was on fire, every nerve screaming in agony. I heard a high-pitched, constant sound that took me a moment to recognize as the heart monitor emitting a regular beep. I was in an ambulance, moving, with a paramedic holding my hand. "She's back," he shouted to the colleague who was driving. "We have a pulse." I tried to open my eyes, but they weighed tons. I managed only a small movement, but it was enough. The paramedic noticed and leaned close. "Senora, you're okay. You had a heart attack, but you're alive. We're taking you to the hospital. Just a few more minutes." I wanted to speak, to tell him about what I had seen, about the light, about my grandmother, about everything. But I couldn't form words. My tongue was heavy, my throat dry. So I closed my eyes again, not to return to that place of light, but simply because I was exhausted. The following days were a blur of emergency surgery, stents being placed in my coronary arteries, medications, pain, and slow recovery. Javier was by my side the whole time, holding my hand, crying silently. When I could finally speak properly, a few days later, I tried to tell him about what happened. He listened in silence, tears streaming down his face. "I thought I had lost you," he whispered. "When the police called saying you were in the hospital, that your heart had stopped, I thought my world had ended." "I know," I said, squeezing his hand. "I saw what would have happened. I saw you, I saw the children. That's why I came back." Miguel and Sofia came to see me that night. My teenage son, normally so stoic and cool, cried in my arms like he hadn't since he was a child. Sofia didn't let go of my hand the entire time, as if afraid I would disappear if she let go. In the following months, I struggled to process what had happened. I read everything I could find about near-death experiences. I was surprised to discover that so many other people had lived through something similar: the sensation of leaving the body, the light, unconditional love, life review, the feeling of universal knowledge, the decision to return. Some doctors tried to explain it as a hallucination caused by lack of oxygen to the brain, or release of endorphins, or other neurological explanations. But I knew it was more than that. The clarity, the reality of that experience was greater than anything I had ever lived. If that was a hallucination, then this physical life is an even bigger hallucination. The experience changed everything for me. Things that used to worry me, my age, a few extra pounds, whether my house was pretty enough, whether my clothes were fashionable, all of that completely lost its importance. Not because I had become indifferent to life, but because I now saw what really mattered. I spent more time with my family. I turned off the television and we talked more at meals. Javier and I took trips we had always postponed. I made peace with my sister over old, silly arguments. I called old friends I had lost touch with. I volunteered at a hospice, sitting with people at the end of life, offering comfort and assuring them there was nothing to fear and why students noticed the change. I had always been a good teacher, but after the experience I brought a different passion and presence to the classroom. I spoke about literature not just as technical analysis, but as exploration of the human condition, of love, of loss, of the search for meaning. Some students opened up to me about their own struggles, and I could offer them something more than just academic knowledge. Don't speak openly about my experience with everyone. I've learned that some people aren't ready to hear, or simply can't accept it. And that's okay. Each person is on their own journey. But when I feel someone is ready, when I perceive that openness, I share my story, hoping it might bring some comfort or insight. One thing I learned is that we don't need a near-death experience to live with this expanded awareness. We can choose to live with love, presence, and gratitude now. We can choose to value every moment, every person, every breath. Death eventually comes for all of us, that's an inescapable fact. But while we're here, we can choose to truly live. Today, 3 years later, I feel that every day is a gift. I wake up grateful for another morning, for the chance to hug my children, to kiss my husband, to see the sunrise. I don't live without fear. I still worry about my health, my family, the state of the world. But fear no longer paralyzes me. I know there's something greater, something beautiful waiting beyond this life, and most importantly, I know that love is real, that it continues, that it transcends physical death. Every act of kindness, every moment of genuine connection, every time we choose love instead of fear, all of this remains, creating waves of light in a universe that is fundamentally made of consciousness and love. Don't know if I'll have another chance to visit that light before my final death. Part of me longs for that peace, that absolute love. But another part is grateful to be here, in this imperfect physical world, with its pains and joys, its challenges and triumphs. Because it's here that we grow, it's here that we learn, it's here that we practice love in its most difficult forms. When my time truly comes, I won't be afraid. I know what awaits me. But until then, I'll live each day fully, love completely, and try to leave the world a little better than I found it. Because now I know, beyond a shadow of doubt, that every life matters, that every choice has meaning, and that we are all part of something infinitely greater and more beautiful than we can imagine. This is my story. This is my truth. And if it can bring comfort or hope to even one person who is struggling with the fear of death or the pain of loss, then it was worth sharing. Death is not the end. It's just the beginning of a new journey. And love, true love, never dies.